While researching a video, I reached out to the developers of Kero Quest 64 about their experience developing a modern N64 game. It was very hard to fit much of our 2-hour conversation in, so here's a less chopped version. I mentioned the video I'm doing. It's all about if video games are art, then how do remakes factor into that, and what parts of a game do you keep the same, and what do you change when you remake something. Your game kind of fits into that, because you're doing like an N64 style thing, but you're not really rendering it at all the same way an N64 game would be. So that was what was interesting to me, like what do people want to update and what do they want to keep the same?
As far as the engine goes, we're using Unity, which is modern engine, you know, like it has support for high frame rates, high resolution, like dynamic shadows, like anything you can expect from like a modern game. But what we had to do when we made Kero is that we had to turn all that shit away. Like we had to like remove everything basically, because we don't want the game to look too fancy. We don't want the game to look like Wind Waker, what they did with Wind Waker HD as opposed to Wind Waker. We definitely wanted the game to feel as retro as it could, with some enhancement on top of that we can provide because we're using a modern architecture.
Now, is there like a max frame rate?
Internally, I limit the game to 60, but the game can be ran at any frame rate that your monitor can support. So basically, we use the delta time, and no matter the frame rate, the movement is going to be the same. It's not going to speed up, it's not going to slow down. And I feel like that's something that Nintendo games should have used on N64, because then they would have allowed for better frame rates at times.
How does that impact how you do animations? Because they looked like faithfully like N64 models do. They seemed to move in a way that was convincing.
The general rule of thumb is that any vertex can only be affected by a single bone. Like, you cannot have what modern models have. So you just kind of smartly have to decide, what do I connect and what do I keep segmented? It's like, what looks smoother and doesn't distort if you move it. I don't really animate for any specific frame rate. I kind of just have, like, you know, the animation curves, and those kind of just let you do smoothly something that can work at any frame rate. The coins are a pre-rendered two-dimensional sprite. We had at one point considered giving the players an option to enable 3D coins, like how some ROM hacks in Mario 64 had 3D coins. And they just looked so unnatural to me that the first thing I thought was, I'm going to not make it 16 frames. Way too smooth. It feels uncanny.
I was kind of interested in, like, what do you choose to animate at a low FPS to make it faithful like that versus most of the characters are animating at something much smoother?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like, for animated textures, I generally kind of follow like a loop of 8 frames, and how quickly those frames are played back might differ. Like, I don't directly think about the frame rate. I just make 8 frames of animation, and then I just play that at a speed that feels good.
I assume you never considered doing like a 17 frames per second lock or anything like that. Because nobody would want to play a game like that now, right?
Nobody wants to play that, and if somebody wants to play that, then shame on you. Like, why? Why? I legit want to sit down with you and ask you why, because and who hurt you in the past.
It seemed like you have really long draw distances. Do you feel like that's one area where you were able to take advantage of modern engines and hardware? You're not limited by the levels of detail the N64 would have had?
Oh yeah, no, like for sure. Like, if we just talk about polygons themselves, I think the levels could have ran correctly on N64 without any kind of culling. But issue comes later with the objects, because in Mario 64 the objects don't show up unless you're like really close to them. But for us, like, we didn't have
the
that.
Object. There are some objects in SM64, like the stars and the red coins, that are coded that you can see them from way further away than other objects.
Yeah, because I know Mario himself, he gets squished into a little cube person when you're 10 feet away from the camera.
Yeah, Mario's like, what, 800 polygons?
That was a lot to load all at once, and they just basically made a LOD model for him, level of detail.
Mamma mia, I'm a come in for my princess.
Over here in Kero, we don't really care about that, because, as I said, like, Kero's model can be run on calculator if we wanted to. So yeah.
Well, I was thinking, like, not only could I see the shard across the level, but, like, I can see the whole stage and how I would have to go over to that shard. And on N64, it seems like maybe too much of that would have to be compromised at that kind of distance. It would be harder to plan how to get over there and do that stuff.
I mean, the N64, technically, you can also see the entire level. I could technically just put like one of the Kero levels into like a Mario 64 mod, and it would probably render the entire thing. Should maybe have to cut out like the C because it's pretty big.
How do you handle mip maps? Is it more modern style, or are you doing... Like on N64 is really just kind of like a blur.
When it comes to literal map mapping, we have pretty much universally disabled that on everything in our game.
So if you look at a tree from a distance, it's gonna look just as sharp as when you're close to it. And as far as like resolution, well, we don't really want to lock the resolution to 240p because we're past the old times of the CRTs and like having resolution limitations.
You do have that like original kind of filter where it looks aliased. Is it just sort of like a pixelation filter that's being applied?
Yeah, so that's basically two filters. It's a low-res filter that reduces the resolution by 4 times. And I have a data filter which just creates some like color artifacts on the screen.
Do you get like a downsampling effect out of that?
Yeah, pretty much. With both of them it just kind of looks retro and I like it. But I didn't want to go any further than that because basically people will always say that if you try to go fully N64 like and fully accurate, you're never gonna reach it because of how like hard the N64 is graphically. It will be shooting us in the foot trying to reproduce that one-to-one. So why do it even in the first place? So instead we just try to give something for the people that want that, something light, not a lot of coding involved, and then we can just be done with it and focus on the gameplay, which I think is the most important part.
It seems like it's interconnected, like you have switches that you have to push in one area to open up things in a different one. Like the levels aren't just standalone things like in Mario 64.
Like the club blocks you see, they're practically like the cap switches in SM64.
I pretty much coded it the same way, where in the save data, I have a spot reserved for level data. But outside of that, I have like data, global data, which is shared across all levels. And in that data, there is, have you pressed this switch? Have you pressed this other switch?
How do you like collaborate together? Because as I understand it, BroDute, you're making like the level designs and stages, and then Rianne is pretty much doing everything that's not bolted down to the ground, like the characters, the enemies.
Yeah.
Do you ever make something and then, you know, the other person says maybe that doesn't fit with what you're trying to do? How do you keep the art style consistent?
Like I have a couple times thought like, hey, this stone texture, it looks kind of inaccurate or inconsistent with some other stone textures. Maybe we could try this. But generally with the character models, I kind of just do my own thing. They're actually very different from how BroDute designs. Because BroDute, he kind of just textures everything, whereas I avoid textures and use vertex colors almost exclusively. Except for things like eyes or like a pattern on a shirt. I will basically always use vertex coloring.
Was there anything like from the 64 that you knew you did not want to do, even if it was authentic?
That would be the lighting, because like I do really want to try and make the whole game vertex lit, which is challenging because if we have any light sources in a level and there's big faces, because the levels of course aren't gonna be super detailed, you're gonna get weird lighting issues because it's not smooth, it's per vertex. But still, even with per vertex lights, we can have more lights than an N64 would be able to have. We can have that sort of interpolated, old school, triangle shape looking lighting stuff going on, but we can have more of it. We have this system where there's actually 3 ambient colors. So the sky has a color, and like the equator, I think it was called, has a color, and the bottom has a color. So if we were to have like a green at the bottom and white at the sky, then you would get a green to white gradient going up. Faces that go down have a green color, and faces that go up have a white color. And it's all handled per vertex to still give you that like N64 vertex lit feeling, even though there's more going on than there would have been on an actual N64 game.
Right now, what would be holding it back is like some of the textures. N64 can take like sometimes 64x64. Most of the time in Kero I use like 128 times 128 just so it practically is still my 64 type N64 type textures, but like a little bit bigger so they don't repeat as much.
We still wanted things to look like an N64 game, so we had to put some kind of limitation, but those are not hard-coded. Like if we ever need like Over here, you can
Yeah.
just take a 1,000 by 1,000 PNG, shove that in the game, and it just works. In the demo, we could do whatever we wanted, right? Like we could code as bad as we wanted, but for the final game, we have to not do that because otherwise the Switch would not be able to run the game. We are more aware of how we code things because of the Switch. The Switch not being that powerful.
It's kind of funny to me that your limit isn't what the N64 could do, but what the Switch can do.
Yeah.
When doing a game like this.
The big issue is that Unity is, like, specifically the Unity game engine sucks to work with on the Nintendo Switch. It is not well optimized. If this game is a success and we want to go on and make more games, I think we should look into finding a different game engine. And Godot is definitely on the radar.
Have you ever found that you can't do an N64 type visual with the modern engines that you have? Because I know at one point GoNets was working on Glide N64, and there are textures that are like wrapping in a way that OpenGL just didn't have a command to do. I think he had to solve that by coming up with shaders or...
Oh, I will say, like, shader programming I think is kind of fun. And also, Unity has a very convenient, like, node system to visually script shaders. I have not had a single, like, a visual effect that the N64 could do that I wanted to recreate that didn't work out. Like, everything has been smooth sailing.
What is your opinion about ray tracing in N64? Like what Dario is doing with the plugin or what's going to come to the recomps? Are you a fan of that, or do you think it doesn't really have a place in N64 games, or...
I think it's fine.
Personally, I think it's fascinating. I am actually someone who does like ray tracing. There's just something about that photorealistic lighting that shaders can't frequently easily recreate the way it did. And even though I think it looks kind of butt ugly in N64 scenes, I think it's fascinating that it exists at all.
Well,
Yeah.
I've seen people talk about like the N64 promo renders, like it's a completely different visual style than what you got on the actual system. And so it's almost like there are different ways to try to do an N64 throwback.
To be fair, I will say that does denature the game, in my opinion. Just having like the low quality gameplay, quote unquote, with the really high poly models that look a bit too shiny. Like, I feel like that denatures the game. But if we're talking about strictly the N64 models and we add ray tracing to that, I think it looks great. I just
Okay.
don't agree with adding high poly models on top of that.
Alright, so you wouldn't really have any interest in doing an N64 style game that's not like the actual console, but like the promo art and...
I think it would be interesting to do that as the sequel if we did the whole game in that style. I have actually tried to recreate that feel, and I've actually looked into the technology that made it work, and it was so painful to work with NURBS. That's what the system was called. I couldn't even make half of Kero's head before I just ran away screaming.
I did think of maybe going full modern, but the reality of it is that it's way harder, and I needed to find somebody that I know I could trust with the quality of their work. So that's why I approached BroDute.
So it's kind of like the modding foundation from 64 is what this game was kind of built on.
Yeah, I practically make these levels like I still make my 64 levels. I've been making my 64 mod since 2012, so I got a long history in like making levels for SM64. It's just like my art style and how I make the levels.
Is it a lot easier when you have control over everything making your own game, or is it harder because you have so much more work to do?
It depends if you're a programmer or not. If you're the programmer, you have to recode all the objects, all the movements that the game you're trying to base yourself off of did. But if you're just a like a map artist, the only thing you pretty much have to do is learn a new engine, a new set of tools.
If you did fully modern graphics, would you change the mechanics and the controls and the general gameplay too? Or would you want something that still kind of plays like Kero Quest does?
I think the gameplay loop of Kero Quest is great, so personally I would say just keep that going.
It's just going to be better Kero Quest with better graphics, I guess.
Yeah, like I thought it was a lot of fun to play, and like sometimes if you go back to the actual 64 games, something can be kind of clumsy. I didn't have very much of that. It feels like you did a pretty good job like idealizing what a 64 game is. You know, what I remember 64 games being, if you don't actually go back to them and see how clunky some of the camera systems and stuff were. It's like a polished up version.
I mean, that's exactly also the case with SM64. Like we earlier said, like some of the later levels just don't really hold up.
It's like you go to play in Mario Odyssey and you're like, oh yeah, this plays fine. I wonder how it is exactly what I remember Mario 64 being, but it feels better. And then you go back to Mario 64 and you just shut the game down after 5 minutes. You just want to go back to Odyssey. If you play Mario 64 nowadays, there's a lot of things that didn't age really well. Like you can jump, but you cannot turn after jumping. You can only like move left and right slightly. I wanted to fix that. I definitely wanted the controls to feel more modern. The long jump is definitely something I wanted to give a more froggy feel to it. So in Mario 64, when you long jump, you're pretty much stuck at that speed going forward and you cannot turn. While in Kero, you can actually like slow it down and you can turn. You can turn midair during a long jump. I feel like while the retro graphics can appeal to nostalgic people, the movement, if I were to make the movement like Mario 64, that wouldn't have appealed to the large audience, you know? I wanted people to say, oh, this is an N64 game, but I also wanted people that never played those games to say, oh, this is interesting. Oh, it plays like a modern game. In the marketing of the game, I kind of wanted to go and say, hey, our game controls better than Mario 64. But then...
the Nintendo is gonna be.
Yeah.
No. But
Can I
I wanted the game from the get-go to support 2 analog sticks. If you want to play with keyboard and mouse, you can. But I wanted for sure the base game, when you boot the game for the first time, to be supporting 2 sticks.
It seems you kind of have the D-pad camera system that's a little bit like the Mario 64 type.
Because most my 64 ROM hacks nowadays use something called parallel cam, and it's pretty useful if you design levels around it. So I wanted that for Kero as well.
I didn't want the parallel cam. Like, it was a huge debacle for a while with all 3 of us. I basically was in the mindset that nobody in their right minds would want to play like a modern N64 3D platformer with like arrow keys as the camera, you know? So I'm like, okay, I guess I can have the camera, but I'm not gonna like it. And then I saw more and more people start to use that camera, and I'm like, okay, well, yeah, you're right, BroDute, that was a good choice to make.
I think we all even use more buttons than the N64 would have, at least in a comfortable way, considering the shape of that thing.
Yeah, no,
We
the game
even, as a
cannot be
joke-
played on
Wait.
N64
Yeah.
completely.
So if you connect
Yeah.
a Switch Online controller to PC, it wouldn't have enough buttons.
Yeah.
Yes.
We talked about doing a low frame rate, fully old kind of 3D game, and you were not interested in that at all, but I've seen a lot of horror games that are doing 20 FPS, the wobbly polygons. They're going fully in on PS1 graphics.
Yeah, so the reason for that is because they want to convince you that that was an old game that
Yeah.
was like a lost haunted copy, whereas that's not what we're doing.
Yeah.
I do actually genuinely like that. I would like to accurately recreate PlayStation graphics, and I'm actually kind of sad that it's mostly being associated with this analog horror genre, because I think it can be more than that.
What I think the horror games are trying to do is that they're trying to make you uneasy by showing you old graphics that you're not really used to and that are distorted, so you think there's something in the fog while there isn't. They want to play with you basically because it's a horror game, that's the goal. But you don't really see that in something that's like a regular game, like a 3D platformer, because we don't need to do that.
Well, I guess I'm out of questions again. Do you have anything that you want to share that we didn't cover yet?
I do plan on making maybe a modding update at some point where people can just download Unity and start making levels and export those for the game.
Yeah, that would be
I do
fun.
want to make that at some point.
So the TLDR for me personally is that I think a picture of the game should feel more N64, but the game in motion shouldn't necessarily have to feel the same. That's my big look onto this. Yeah, I'm very excited to eventually be able to call this game done with the 3 of us. We're gonna be proud of this.
Go play a good game, have fun. That's what matters to me. I just like making levels that people can just run around and have fun in.
Thanks everybody
And with
for
that-
taking the time for this again.
No problem.
Likewise, thanks for having us.
Wow, video games are hard. I learned a lot from this, and I hope you did too. Anyway, I used a couple Mario tracks in this, so I'll see you in hell.
Game over.